Okay, we're going to kick off Chapter 4, the Principles of Design, this lecture here. So, an introduction. The process of creation involves choosing which visual elements to use. It also involves organizing those elements so the final arrangement best conveys the artist's intentions. In two-dimensional arts, the organization of the visual elements is called composition. A broader term that applies to the entire range of the visual arts is design. Design indicates both the process of organizing visual elements and the product of that process. So the principles of design, as described by the book, are unity and variety, balance, emphasis and subordination, directional forces, repetition and rhythm, and scale and proportion. And so artists don't use all of these principles in every work that they make. They might choose one or two things that they use in a piece. But we'll take a look at each one of the principles of design, and that will provide us with a little bit of an understanding of how artists work and how design affects us. So the first one in that list was unity and variety. So you can see up here, unity and variety. So unity is the appearance of oneness. So we're going to start off with unity here. A cube painted all one color would have absolute unity without any variety. And that's because it's all one color and a cube is very much the same on every side. So it's identical on all sides. It's the same width, same height, same thickness. So that would be a really extreme example of unity. And an artist, John McCracken, he creates pieces that are very unified without very much variety. So variety is kind of the opposite of unity, right? So we'll take a look at one of John McCracken's pieces. It's very close to being almost perfectly unified. So this piece is called Untitled. It's from 1970. It's polyester resin, fiberglass, and plywood. And it's fairly large. It's 96 inches tall by 22 wide by 3 inches deep. So the yellow color throughout helps to really unify this piece. Every side of this piece is the same color, which creates unity, right? There is some variety in the height, width, and thickness of this piece. So like I said earlier, a cube would be even more unified because all of the dimensions would be exactly the same. So this piece stands over 8 feet tall and it leans quietly and anonymously against the wall. And John McCracken kind of works on these things that he calls planks, and they're basically very minimalist sculptures. And he leans the planks against the wall, and his intention in doing that is to kind of connect the spheres of two-dimensional painting and then three-dimensional sculpture. So he's kind of hearkening or reflecting or tying back to paintings on the wall by leaning these sculptures on the wall. So he has a really laborious process of sanding, painting, polishing this polyester resin on plywood to achieve this really flawless patina that looks machine-made. And McCracken once said, "My tendency is to reduce or develop everything into single things which refer to nothing outside themselves, but which at the same time possibly refer or relate to everything." So he's very specific about what he makes. They're very singular. They tend to be very unified. And they don't refer to anything outside of themselves, but can still refer to everything. So they're kind of almost blank slates. You could look at it like that. So variety is the next up in the principles here. So variety, on the other hand, provides diversity. Variety acts to counter unity, so it's basically the opposite. So the more variety we see in an artwork, the less orderly it becomes, and it can actually become chaotic. So we're going to kind of look at an extreme example of the use of variety in a piece. And this is actually a sculpture as well. It's more like found objects. So this is by Sarah Z. It's called Triple Point, or Gleaner, from 2013. So she's got a mix of media here, right? She's got trees, rocks, aluminum, wood, steel, bricks, stone, sandbags, outdoor pump, outdoor lights, those kinds of things. So this is an installation piece. You would basically walk through this space, and it's very chaotic. She's using a lot of variety. So there's aluminum tubes that kind of form these diagonals that lead your eye from the ground toward the top of the building. And the work seems to have been created by kind of an improvisational process. And there's a sense that this is important to the artist, this improvisational process. And as you've seen in the previous two slides, too much unity can be boring, but too much variety tends to look rather chaotic. So we'll take a look at another piece here. Jacob Lawrence Going Home. So he's actually balancing unity and variety in this next piece that we're going to look at. So we'll take a look at those. He established some visual themes in his piece, and then he repeated and varied those themes throughout his piece. So we'll take a look at this and talk about that. So balancing unity and variety can be really hard for an artist, but Jacob Lawrence did achieve this in this piece called Going Home from 1946. It's made with gouache, which is a type of paint, I believe. So he created a lot of variety because all the different figures and people within the composition are different. But by repeating these seats here, these green seats, he has a repetition going on with the shape and color of these seats and the space between them. He's actually creating a visual theme with those seats. The red is the same color throughout the painting, and this helps to kind of unify different areas of the painting through color. The way he divided up the canvas is actually quite orderly and not chaotic, which also helps to create unity. So you can see he's put a line up here about, this far down. Same with up here, there's a line here that mirrors that. So that's creating a bit of a sense of unity because he's dividing up his canvas in a kind of a organized way. And then this repetition, these lines created from those seat backs, is dividing up the canvas. So Jacob Lawrence Going Home was a part of a larger collection of paintings that was called the Migration Series. And I found a video that I'll put in the week 3, I believe. And you can look at that. It's actually kind of going over the history of this painting. But moving on, we're going to move on. So still on unity variety, we're going to be looking at another piece that does a good job of balancing variety and unity. So it's done by Pieter de Hooch. It's interior of a Dutch house from 1658, oil on canvas. So all the action is enclosed in one room, which helps create unity. It's not overly crowded, which helps to create unity as well. If it was very crowded, and it would start to look chaotic and have a lot of variety in it. So there's a liberal use of squares and rectangles, which provide variety because they're different colors, but it also creates kind of a pattern and a structure that helps promote unity at the same time. So it's definitely a balancing act between unity and variety, which is great. He's been able to be very successful with this piece in balancing unity and variety. So if we look at those rectangles on the floor, you can see that they are creating variety because there's so many of them, different shapes, and they are different colors, but there's a nice pattern there, a predictable pattern for our eye to follow, which helps to create unity at the same time. And then that pattern is also kind of repeated in the ceiling here, which creates a sense of visual unity between the floor of this piece and the ceiling, and even more of that same kind of grid pattern in these windows even. And you can see he's got even more square shapes here. So here's a square, here's a square. So he's using a lot of straight lines in this piece, and it's creating patterns which help to promote unity, but there's also a lot of variety there too. But it's a nice balance between the two. And speaking of balance, we're going to move on to the principle of balance. Balance is the achievement of equilibrium, in which acting influences are held in check by opposing forces. So balance can be achieved through either symmetry or asymmetry. So we'll talk about symmetrical balance. It's near or exact matching of left and right sides of a three-dimensional or two-dimensional composition. So we'll take a look at a piece by James Hoban, Design for the President's House. So architects often employ symmetrical balance to give unity and kind of a formal grandeur to a building's facade or front side. In 1792, James Hoban won a competition for his design for the President's House, a drawing of a symmetrical, Georgian-style mansion. The central part of the building is unified under this triangular-shaped pavilion here. So we got that triangle in the middle. And the windows are identical and evenly divided on each side. So the symmetrical design is useful in architecture because it's easier to comprehend than asymmetry. And symmetry helps to create a feeling of permanence. And we generally want our buildings to seem motionless and stable, especially a government building needs to be very formal and stable looking because we look for strength in our government. So there's kind of a little bit of a symbolism in the symmetrical nature of this building because it creates that strength and that permanence that we also want in our government. So if we were to take this and just draw a line down the middle of it, it's basically the same on both sides, right? So this is a very symmetrical design. Here's the White House. They changed it a little bit. I think it's been updated slightly, but it pretty much looks very similar to the original drawing. So this is basically what I just said. So symmetry might be a little less desirable in sculpture and two-dimensional art, and few works are perfectly symmetrical. So we're going to take a look at a piece by Damien Hirst called Posterity, the Holy Place. In its example, it is actually perfectly symmetrical. So Damien Hirst is a really interesting guy. He's very famous, modern contemporary artist that is very rich as well. So he formed the entirety of this out of butterfly wings from a dealer that humanely raises them, supposedly. And it's very symmetrical at every level. You can see it's totally symmetrical. And it actually resembles a stained glass window, which is very intentional. And it's even more symmetrical than your typical stained glass window that you would find in a church. The stability and symmetry and the use is used as a tool in religious art, and it helps to actually in religious art suggest the divine because it's perfect. You know, one side perfectly reflecting the other. It can suggest the divine. But the sheer luminosity of this piece, due to like the shimmery butterfly wings that were used, it exceeds that of a stained glass window because the butterfly wings do not, depend on direct light shining through them or sunlight to show its brilliance. And the work is made up of a lot of really small parts. And the level of symmetry helps to really structure the composition. So it creates a lot of structure for the composition. Too much symmetry can be boring, but this piece is not boring because there's so much variety in the shapes and the colors of the butterfly wings. So that's kind of how they're able to use symmetry, because they added variety in the coloring and the shape of the butterfly wing. I found some artists on Damien Hirst. I think we may do some sort of assignment or something on him, but we're going to move on in this video for now. So we're going to talk about asymmetrical balance. Left and right sides are not the same, but yet the visual elements within an asymmetrical piece can still be balanced. So we'll take a look at this piece here by Edgar Degas, Jockeys Before the Race, 1878 through 1879. It's oil,